Hello, lovely beings. It's JJ Rose. I thought I'd put together a compilation of some of my weirdest stories with the paranormal because I know a lot of people enjoy that stuff. So, the first one that I'll start off with is the Hat Man story, which I know a ton of people have had experiences with him. When I was around 7, where we lived, my bedroom was on the bottom floor and my parents' bedroom was upstairs, and I always slept with the door closed, and that was because if I opened the door to get out because I was downstairs, my parents would hear me. So in the middle of the night, I'm asleep and something wakes me up because something's hinky, and the door slowly opening. And I'm thinking, okay, this doesn't feel like my parents coming in to check on me while I'm asleep. And this darker than dark man walks in very slowly and gets about to the middle of the room just staring at me. And I was just frozen in fear. And he was wearing a hat. Now, I've heard the Hat Man described with all sorts of different hats, but this one looked like an Abe Lincoln hat, like one of those old-timey top hats, but like a little bit stubbier. So not a pork pie, not a fedora, but not a full-blown top hat. And he just stood there staring at me. And like I said, I'm fully awake, staring at him, frozen solid. And he comes closer to me, and I'm trying to say the words that I was taught to say to protect myself. And he gets very close and he says, "Join me." And finally, I was able to get out of my mouth the words that I say in order to protect myself, especially when I was young. And he left, but the door to my room was still wide open. So what was interesting is my dad, who very rarely came to check on me in the middle of the night, all of a sudden comes down about 20 minutes later and he goes, "Why is your door open?" And I didn't want to fully tell him because I knew he would freak out that anything was able to get into our home, and being very protective over me. So I just said, "Oh, I don't know." And he slept on the floor below my bed for the next 2 nights in a row, just making sure, because I know he could feel what exactly was happening to make sure that I was safe. And since then, I've never slept with the door open in my life. Well, one of the next ones that I'll jump into is a dream that I had. It was incidentally a couple days before 9/11 occurred, and I had this horrendous dream that I was in an airport and I was looking for my mom. And I couldn't find her, and there were all these people, and everyone was kind of screaming and running frantically in all different directions. And I was frantically looking for my mom, and I ended up running outside of the airport, like where, normally the cars come around. And the sky was completely ashen gray, and it wasn't like a weather system, like it was something different. And I remember looking up and seeing this giant pile of ash and all of these like flowers and cards, like what people do when memorials happen. Like if something horrible happens on a street, people will leave a whole bunch of cards and flowers. It was like that, but on this ginormous ash pile. And I remember being outside and looking at it and knowing something horribly disastrous had happened, but still just this fear and look from my mother. I wrote the dream down. I even drew a picture of the big old pile that I saw, because the dream was really disturbing to me. And told my mom about it, and she was like, "Well, I'm here." And a couple days later, when 9/11 happened, we were home at the time when it was occurring, but we were both getting ready to leave for work. And what was really interesting is where my mom worked at the time, a little later in the day, we actually got an alert that was a potential attack place because of what it was in close proximity to. So if you get weird dreams and they really stick with you, like you can't shake them type of thing, write them down, listen to them. You never know what exactly you might be tuning into. So jumping around, the Pulse nightclub incident, now that is in a different time zone than I was living at the time. and it had not happened yet. So I was on a much earlier time zone. And that night I was going to go out with one of my friends, and her and I, we've known each other for, 15 years before this. Like we're family pretty much at this point. And so it was just her and I that night. We were going to go have like a little fun girls' night, go get dinner, go to a little bar. Now, I don't really drink because I was the driver. But we were having fun, and we were in like a totally safe little tiny, place. We kind of knew people situation. And out of nowhere, I get this panic attack. And it wasn't like a normal panic attack. It was like, I need to be home now. And luckily she knows me well enough to know that if I say that, listen. So literally we had to walk, 5 blocks in heels to our car. And I'm almost running at this point, and I don't like to run very often. So we get in the car, I literally race her home. I get home, and when I get in the door, there was a little bit of relief, but it was like this weird, like, okay, fine, I'm home. This is where I need to be. So at this point, I get into bed, and I didn't watch news at this point. I was on a news diet just for mental health. And I'm laying in bed, and I have the TV on, like, I don't know, just probably some recorded show just to lull me to sleep. And I apparently fall asleep very quickly, which is odd for me because I don't normally do that. And I end up waking up about half an hour later. Now, mind you, my phone is like always on silent, so nothing really is there to wake me up. And I lived alone at the time. So I wake up and I'm like, oh, okay, maybe I need to go use the restroom. And as I look across my room is filled with all of these people. And obviously I could tell a spirit, versus a real human because they were a little transparent, but there were all these random people in my room. So I kind of freeze, and I'm looking around trying to see, is there any continuity to who I'm seeing or why? And there was one, it looked like a mother and a son, and she was wearing kind of this interesting, almost like a muumuu dress type thing. And I have like a little bench seat in my room, and there was a young man sitting there on the bench seat, and he had a cell phone, and he was kind of hunched over his phone and looked very forlorn while he was like sending a text message. And then all these other people doing all these other random things. Now, mind you, I haven't watched the news. I haven't looked at my phone. It's the middle of the night where I'm at. I was just asleep. So I get up and figure, okay, let me just go put some water on my face and, try and wake up and figure out what's going on. And I'm literally walking in between these spirits who are just kind of standing around with different weird looks on their faces, like fear, shock, admonishment, and all sorts of stuff. And I'm literally saying, excuse me, pardon me, as I'm walking through them. So then I come back to bed and do the same little, excuse me, pardon me. And I'm just sitting there and I'm watching all of this. And it's just, they're not really doing anything. It was almost like they weren't frozen, but they weren't necessarily doing anything. But there was a little bit of movement here and there. And so finally around, I don't know, like 3:30 in the morning, my time, I'm able to fall asleep, and, I wake up in the morning and there's no one in my room. Thank you. So obviously I look at my cell phone at this point, and I'm being blown up with text messages and calls saying this horrible thing happened in Florida at the Pulse nightclub. And, I throw on the news and I'm thinking, oh my God, that's absolutely awful. But because I'm on a news diet, I don't want to watch a whole lot of news about it. So I kind of turn it off and just know, okay, I'm not sure what that was last night that I saw, but maybe it has some correlation, not sure. So a couple days later, one of my friends who is part of the LGBTQ plus community, we're in the car together, and he took what happened really, really hard and to heart, as anyone who cares would. Not only did it affect his community, maybe on another side, of the country from where we were, but still, it's your community. It's when anything horrible happens, you care. And so we're in the car, and he's kind of just telling me his feelings. And so randomly, and I don't normally share things like this with him, I decide to tell him the experience I had that night. And he looks at me and he goes, tell me what they look like and what they were wearing. And so I started listing off the different ones that I could remember because there were so many. And his eyes get huge and he looks at me and he goes, "Those were the victims." And I said, "What?" Now, at this point, there was a website made up of all the different victims and what they were doing there. So the mother and son, the son had just come out to his mother, and to celebrate him and to support him, she actually ended up getting dressed up and taking him to the Pulse nightclub that night as his coming out party. And the gentleman sitting down sending the text message, apparently he was sending the text message to his partner saying, "I know I'm not going to make it out of here." And, at this point, I'm starting to understand, okay, that's who I was seeing. And I don't know, it was just one of those experiences where I'm not sure why I saw it or why, but I know that, like, I have a deep love for the LGBTQ plus community, and I have so many friends that are a part of it. So maybe it was a gift that I got to see that and just maybe be of comfort or even energetically help. I have no clue if I was just a witness or if I was actively doing anything, but it was a strange incident. Just because, I do have sixth sense openness doesn't mean that I always understand why these things are happening. In retrospect, looking at it, probably because it affected so many people on such a deep level that I love and care about, just being affected by their community being affected. It could have been that, but I treat it as a gift. It wasn't scary, it wasn't eerie, it was just kind of odd. And then when I found out what happened, I felt very grateful for that experience, but at the same time, felt so saddened by what happened. Now, after that, I've got to lighten it up a little bit. So I'm going to tell you about a situation I'm a little dubious about. So my hubby and I went over to some friend's house. They're another couple, and we had only been there like 2 or 3 times before. They used to have barbecues on Sundays where a whole bunch of friends would come and we all hang out. And, I don't open with, "Hi, I have all these talents." I usually keep it pretty close to the vest until I know either people are interested in it or can accept it. But sometimes I just like to be a normal person, right? So it was about the second or third time we were over there, and the girlfriend was showing me some of the baby kittens they had, and she had like a paranormal show on the TV. And I was like, "Oh, do you enjoy that show? I've seen that show." And she's like, "Yeah, like we're so into the paranormal stuff. We watch it all the time. We think it's so cool." And I'm like, "Oh, that's awesome." And of course, at this point, my hubby's looking at me kind of winking like, "Okay, you can open up and around these people. Obviously, they're interested." So he kind of says a little something to kind of feel them out, and they're there for it, right? Like they're super excited. They're like, "Oh, we could talk about this stuff and what experiences." So, I kind of gently graze over, things I've seen or talents that I have, but don't say much, right? So the boyfriend in this situation, he's like, "Oh, I have this spirit box thing and an EVP thing on my phone, and we mess around with that a lot times at nighttime." And I'm like, "Okay, like have fun with that." And so apparently we were talking, and I kept seeing something in the upstairs window, but they did have cats, so I just kind of figured maybe it's a spirit, maybe it's a cat. Gonna leave it alone, not gonna dig too deep, just here to have fun. So apparently we leave that day, and about 20-30 minutes later, right when we get home, we get a message saying, "Dude, like something super creepy happened when you left. We put the phone down with the EVP recorder and literally just let it run for like 8 minutes while everyone's outside talking." Now, mind you, it's a pretty small space outside, so everyone's kind of grouped together. So you hear this audio, which is a ton of people just talking, but you can tell they're not next to the phone. The phone's kind of off to the side. And halfway through, you hear this little girl's voice go, "Can you hear me?" And that was it. And they sent it to me, and of course the first thing I'm thinking is they're totally messing with me, like, I'm the newbie in the group and, oh, let's, have a fun go at the psychic or whatever. And so I really didn't believe it. But both of them, and knowing them for as many years as I have now, they both stick to the story that actually happened and they were not making that up. So like I said, I'm a little dubious of it because I know people like to play jokes. And, I didn't feel a little girl spirit there, but I'm not saying that it didn't happen. So I'm going to jump into kind of a serious one. Well, it started out fun until it got real serious. So I had gone to a tea party with some friends, and one of the family members of the friend was a bit older, and they were basically in a wheelchair. So they weren't mobile. In order to even stand up was a good, 3 to 5 minute task with help type of situation. But we'd had like a little tea party, and it's kind of interesting because this person was kind of in and out of my life a lot. And in talking to my friend, who is more my age, they kept saying, like, for the past 6 months to a year, that they kept noticing these weird changes with the person in their relative in the wheelchair. So I'm asking, what changes? And we're both kind of noticing when the person's around, where just like the energy's off. But we kind of pay no mind because we know they had health issues and they're on different medication, and maybe it's just a weird side effect, or maybe it's something we're going through ourselves, right? Like just trying to throw all the physical stuff at it that it could be. So this had been going on for a while, and it got to the point where at this tea party, the person went to hug me in the wheelchair. And it was like I made excuses for them not to touch me. It was that kind of vibe, like, I don't even want you to touch me, which is very odd because I'm a big hugger and I'm normally like a very effusive, loving person. So for me to have those feelings is very odd. So I'm kind of checking myself, we're having fun at this little tea party that we're having. And we start ending up having this like pretty deep conversation. And it gets into like a lot of old stuff between my friend and their relative. And like, talk about dredging up the past, like some very old, deep stuff. And then all of a sudden I am sick. Like I'm sick to the point where I run off and I'm throwing up. And I come back out into the main area, kind of like a living room. And I literally lay on the ground, which, seriously, like, completely unlike me. I don't do odd stuff like that. I know I'm a little odd, but not that odd. And I lay on the ground, and of course, everyone's going, what's going on? I'm like, I don't know, I just need to lay here. Please, no one touch me. And I felt myself being readied for something. I just didn't completely know what, because that's how spirit likes to work sometimes. Just throw me a little side ball. So at this point, I get up from laying on the floor, literally in the middle of everyone, and I turn around and I see it. And the person in the wheelchair all of a sudden looks at me, and they start doing those very weird, stiff movements of someone who is possessed. And the thing it was possessed by starts showing itself to me. And the person in the wheelchair literally starts with this super creepy laugh. Something that literally everyone who was in the room, there was 3 of us at the time, besides the wheelchair person, everyone just dead stopped talking. And I'm laser focused on the person. And they look at me and they go, and they call me a name that I won't repeat, and say, oh, so you see me now? I'm so good from hiding from you, aren't I? And so I start in on my clearing, and, not only clearing that, but also keeping the other people in the room safe, because there were 2 very innocent people there who all of a sudden now just got hip to why we were all sensing this weird energy with this person. So this thing starts literally going at a battle of wits with me energetically, and it's saying things to me that this person would never say. This person is very kind, very loving, very, very sweet. doesn't even swear a whole heck of a lot. And this thing is just, it's got a sailor, it's talking weird, it's not even talking with the voice of the person I know. This person has beautiful blue eyes. And when I say their eyes went black, I mean their eyes weren't dilated, like their eyes looked black. It was awful. So I start really going at it, with my white light, just trying to get it out of there, and also trying to protect the other people in the room. And at one point, I am looking at this person in the wheelchair, and I'm kind of grateful, like, okay, they're not able to get up. And just as I think that thought, like, okay, at least they're sedentary and they're not going to move, this human being who is not really mobile literally dashes up and runs across the room and gets in my face. And I mean, I'm telling you, this person normally is not physically able to do this, A, with that agility and speed, and B, just because of the health issue that they have, and gets in my face. And I'm a little stunned, but I keep going, and it gets face to face with me and says, of course, some ugly choice words for me. And all of a sudden, at this point, I'm praying, not only am I doing the work I'm doing, but I'm praying for extreme backup. And it's kind of going at me, kind of knowing it has me pigeonholed because I'm kind of up against a wall at this point. And all of a sudden, it was like the eyes lit up, like with that fear look. And I felt this extremely humongous being behind me. And it was like, imagine being like the cartoons where it's the short little dog and he's kind of yapping. And then all of a sudden, like, the bully's eyes get big, and it's because there's some like ginormous dog behind him. That's kind of how I felt. And so at this point, the thing left. We got it outside the property line. But because I had their younger relative who was more my age there, the younger relative I could see was so afraid of seeing what was actually going on that I needed to protect them. So I'm literally yelling orders at this point, like start grounding, bubble, protect yourself, and trying to help them out. And this thing comes back with a vengeance, and it just keeps going. It took about an hour and a half for this thing to finally leave. And to this day, the person has no recollection of what actually happened. And the person, their relative who's my age, we actually discussed it's better not to tell them. They have no memory really of those 6 months. They don't know what happened that night. They know something happened. They know it was quite, momentous that occurred, but all they know is they feel better now. And energy-wise, after that, I think I slept for about 2 days. So I'm going to switch to something a little lighter at this point. Well, lighter's relative. So it's been a thing my whole life that when earthquakes are going to happen, if they're going to happen and they're far away and they're pretty big, like a 5.5 and over, I get really sleepy. So years ago, there was this day where I get up for work every day, and I would deliberately put my alarm clock across the room, so I would have to physically get up to turn it off. And that's how I could fight the case of the lazies or sleep through it. And I'm not really a hard sleeper normally, but just in case. So this one day, my alarm's going off, and I'm out. I'm sleeping through it. So my roommate at the time actually comes into my room and turns it off because I've just woken the whole house up. And standing over my bed and goes, "What's wrong with you? Like, are you okay?" And I couldn't even open my eyes. All I could say was, "Leave me alone." I didn't even call into work. I didn't text, nothing. I wasn't even able to move. I just was out, asleep. And I didn't take anything for sleep at the time. So there was no reason for this, nor was I sick. So I'm sleeping pretty much the entire day, zero energy. And finally, around 3 or 4 in the afternoon, don't quote me on that time, but it was later in the afternoon, I get a text message. Now, my roommate at the time had brought my phone over to me just to turn off the alarm and also just to have it in case. She was a little worried about what was going on with me that day. And around 3 or 4, I start to wake up and I get this text message from my coworker who knows about my earthquake sleepies. And she texts me and she says, haha, no wonder you didn't show up today. I'm guessing you're probably waking up just about now. There was a 9.2 earthquake in Chile, the country. And she was right. I literally started to wake up at that point. When the earthquakes are going to be close to where I live, which don't happen all the time, but when they do, I get like a physical panic attack, and it's almost like I'm shaking like the earth. Now, I've talked to a couple other sensitives like myself, and after getting a good laugh about how the USGS should just hire us to tell them when one's going to happen, I've met a couple other people who get the same thing. And I have done some study into it physiologically to find out why. And I've heard that there's a gas that's released by the earth right before or a couple hours before an earthquake is going to happen. And it's weird because, something as far as way as Chile from where I lived at the time, that's pretty far. But obviously I was tuned into something. So, random story. I have mentioned before, I am a person, I get angry sometimes, and years upon years ago, there was a situation I was having with this one particular woman who I thought was a friend and was actually not. And as I was leaving her home, I basically turned around and I looked at her and I said, you know what? When you play with fire, you're going to get burned. And I left. Well, apparently she had had a washer and a dryer in a far back room, what would be called like a mud room almost, near the backyard. And they were unplugged because they didn't work. And apparently about 10-15 minutes after I left, now mind you, I was very upset at this person from what they had done, and rightfully so. I get a phone call about 30 minutes later from the other person who lived in that house, and they said, "What did you do?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" And they said, "Well, about 5-10 minutes after you left, the smoke alarm started going off in the back of the house. And we ran back there thinking, no one's cooking. Why is this happening?" And the dryer that was unplugged literally was on fire. Now, I'm not taking full credit for that. That was probably spirits doing, because I wasn't even in that part of the house when this whole thing went down. But, I realized at that point, thoughts are things, words are things. Be careful what you say, especially if you're in a moment of super anger. That can cause damage, whether it's, to something else, because I never want to hurt anybody. But for whatever reason, that happened. And you know what? The woman ended up stopping what she was doing because she was doing some pretty ugly stuff to people. There's always a reason. So one kind of a little bit on the darker spectrum story. I was staying at a friend's house. They weren't there. They would let me stay there occasionally when I would travel up that way. And they had this cat that basically had like a thyroid issue. And the cat was huge. I mean, this cat probably should have been like 10-15 pounds, but this cat was like a good 50 pounds. And it was very sad, actually. I mean, it was a very nice cat, but the cat was so fat that the cat was not able to move from its food dish. So it basically just sat there by its food dish all day. It wasn't even able to move. So I'm over there, and there was someone else staying at the home with me. Now, this person at the time I knew was what I would call an open vessel. So they had done a lot of things that ripped their spiritual web when they were younger, and they could literally have spirits come in and out of them and possess them. And I had seen it more than a few times in talking to this person's parents. They'd seen the kid levitate when he was young. They'd see, like his toys thrown around the room and him just sitting there not touching anything. So already knowing there is a propensity for this, probably wasn't the best night to be where we were, but we were. And so I'm kind of sitting on the couch, doing my own thing. And this person all of a sudden starts to walk out in the living room to talk to me. And I'm thinking, okay. And then I look and I'm like, oh, that's not the person I know. And its face turns around and looks at me, and I can tell that I'm dealing with the dark-end head honcho, shall we say. And so this thing sits down, and it's just being very silky smooth with its words. It's trying to use flattery. You could use your powers with me. You could be so powerful. Think of the things we could do together. And I'm like, yeah, no, thank you, please. Don't work for your side. Respectfully go away. Please get out of this person. Like, this is not a healthy situation for the body that you're writing, nor do I even want you here. And it ends up being this conversation where basically this thing's trying to talk me into switching sides, right? I'm a light worker. It's trying to make me work for the other side. And all of a sudden towards the end, I get a little more strong with my words saying, get out, leave the person alone, leave me alone. Like, the conversation's done, leave. And this thing stands up and it's pretty much going to attack me at this point. And mind you, this fat, beautiful cat sitting across the room, way far away across the room, literally gets up and races over and jumps in the air. And this person was a good 6 feet tall, jumps in the air and literally starts swatting at his face. And cats are protectors, in case you don't know that, but cats are spiritual protectors. Lots of times if I'm having, spiritual attack, I'll wake up. I don't have a cat, but I'll wake up, go downstairs to get some air, and literally there's a cat randomly just sitting at my doorstep. And we don't really have a stray issue in my area. So back to the story. This giant cat literally has now jumped almost, 5.5 feet in the air and is swatting this person's face. And finally the entity leaves the person, and the cat gets on the ground and just crumples at my feet and just looks up at me and just meows. And I said, thank you so much. And of course, the person has no clue what just happened. Like, why am I standing in the living room? Why do I have cat scratches on my face? And what just happened? So that was an interesting time and conversation. Like I said, I like to jump around. So I'm going to tell you about my Bigfoot vision. So first of all, shout out to David Paulides and the Missing 411. If you guys haven't heard about that, the investigative work that he's done is awesome. There are 2 documentaries. I think they're available on Prime. Missing 411, and then my favorite, Missing 411, The Hunted. At the very end, there's some actual audio taken from the 70s from some gentlemen with this super secret camping spot that basically, it's nothing of this earth. And they've had linguists listen to it, doctors who know all about, vocalization of different species, and they've all said it's nothing that we know and it's not a human. So pretty cool stuff. Check out Missing 411. It's an awesome rabbit hole to go down, even if you just want something to entertain you, but it also is pretty fascinating. Also, huge shout out to Mr. Ballen. I know he's on YouTube, and he has a podcast now as well, but I actually learned about Missing 411 from Mr. Ballen. I ended up somehow finding him on YouTube and listened avidly. He's a great storyteller, by the way, to all of his stories on Missing 411. And then looked up David Paulides and then just kind of went further down the rabbit hole with him. So huge shout out to both of them. It's really super duper awesome. But, David Paulides makes no conjectures about what he thinks it is of why all these people are going missing. But obviously, people want to make their conjecture. And there's a lot of conjecture that there's Bigfoot and UFOs, the Fae, a whole bunch of stuff. Real fun yarn. It is true, though, but it's a really fun thing if you haven't been exposed to it. I digress. So I get done listening to these umpteen, episodes from Mr. Ballen about The Missing 411, and I start looking into David Paulides, and I'm ordering some of the books, and I'm sitting there one night, and I just kind of had some free time, and I go, I have never seen a Bigfoot, and I can astral project, so like, why don't I meditate and see if I can find a Bigfoot, and just even see if they're real, like, what's up? So I do. And basically, when I'm going astral projecting, i.e. to a place where I have to kind of find something or find someone, I kind of have to scan a little bit. And so in this case, I'm scanning, and then I kind of lock in, and it's in a foresty area, and there's a waterfall. And so I go through the waterfall into this cave. And in the cave, I see like a large Bigfoot standing there, kind of like the papa. And then behind him, sitting down, was like the mama and more like a baby or a child. I mean, they're all big, but that's what it looked like to me. So I'm looking at this scene, and then I realize the father Bigfoot, who is standing closest to the entrance of the cave, is looking at me. And so we lock eyes, and all I can tell you is this was the most weird and foreign feeling that I've ever had. I mean, I've had some weird experiences in my time, right? But this felt so foreign and so strange that I can honestly understand better, people who have had Bigfoot sightings, of when they're trying to describe the feeling and it's hard for them really to get it out. I can understand now why, because it was that strange. And telepathically, Big Papa Bigfoot basically said, leave and don't search for us again. And I paid my respects, and off I went, and I have never looked for a Bigfoot psychically again, because that was an odd feeling. All right, so on that note, quick little FYI. Just because you have the ability to do something does not mean you do it. So if you can astral project, that's great, but don't go where you're not wanted, and don't go without permission. So, there are some people who can use that talent for some really creepy reasons. My mom had a huge incident when she was young where a man was he really liked her, and he would astral project while she was in the shower or getting changed, and she had to just completely bubble and block him, which can hurt actually, if the person is intending to do things that aren't right. But there are rules, and just be kind. Again, it comes back to treat people the way you'd want to be treated. I wouldn't want someone randomly showing up when, friends or someone, is asking me to do something or to look at something or look for something for them. I do, but very, I already know I'm not checking in on people for no reason. It's not like I'm physically seeing everything anyway. I had one client once, it was actually hilarious. She had asked me to do a scan about her house, so I did, and I had told her about this specific blanket and described it, and at the very end, I guess she didn't quite understand what I was doing, and she goes, so we were talking on the phone, not a video call, like, how were you able to see my house? And please don't judge me because it's messy. So that gave me a good laugh. But again, just because you can do something doesn't mean you do it. Nothing against anyone's will. Treat people how you'd want to be treated, and don't use it for nefarious purposes. Not cool. And, honestly, there are warning systems in place. There are, lots of people who would probably ask, like, oh, if you could do that, why don't you go to, this place or that place? I will say institutions of places of curiosity, led by government places. And I just know that's a no-go. Don't go there. Don't do that. And they probably have their own protections in place one way or another. So on to that subject, but just a little bit different story. So I had someone in my life. I love them dearly, love them deeply. They had some issues where I would literally see they were kind of letting this spirit ride them, shall I say. And they would go off and do things that weren't for their best bodily or mental good. And this is the one time where I actually tried to do something without the person's blessing okay, right? And I should have known better, but I thought I was doing it out of a place of love. So I know this person was about to let this spirit kind of ride them, and they were going to go do some bad stuff for their body and mind. So I basically did some clearing work on them to get this entity that would get them to do all that to go away. And when I say I fought this thing and I kicked it off the planet, I'm not joking. I fought it and I kicked it off the planet. So I get done with this. Energetically, it can be quite taxing. And I get done with this and I get in the shower, and I'm trying to do a salt shower because I want to get all that oogie boogie off. And as I'm in the shower, now mind you, I live alone at this point, and my house is very locked up, so there's no reason anyone should be in my house. I physically see someone come into the bathroom through the shower curtain. And so I rip open the shower curtain, and I'm face to face with this ugly spirit, and he wore a leather jacket. He's got a jacked up face, and he looks at me, and his jaw's a little loose, we'll put it that way, from our little row. And he looks at me and he goes, "I'm back, and don't bother getting rid of me again, because he's only going to pull me in again." And it was one of those moments where I got it. Now, mind you, I was coming from a place of love, just trying to protect this person that I cared about so much. But I also realized it was up to the person to make the choice to release that being. And it was up to the person to ask for help to get rid of that spirit. It was not up to me on my own to do it without that person's consent. So, yes, I admit I have, things that I've done that I wasn't the smartest at or didn't know any better, but it is one of those lessons that, again, just because you know how to do it doesn't mean you go doing it willy-nilly. All right, one scary and then one weird. So, the movie The Conjuring had come out, and at the time, I lived alone, and I lived a couple blocks away from a movie theater. So my beloved cousin comes over, and we're super excited. We're going to go watch this movie. Obviously, I've known about the Warren family, just kind of through paranormal stuff and doing this work and reading books and all sorts of fun stuff. So I'm kind of excited, right? This is the first movie that was coming out, and we were going to go have fun. So I keep a very clean house. I have a nose like a shark. So, my house is very clean. Trash is taken out. Drains are always kept clean. I use lemon, the whole shebang. So obviously we started off at my house, and then we were going to walk to the theater because it's so close. Why even drive? And it was a pretty night. It was like fall. So we're at my house. Everything smells great. Everything looks perfect, nice and clean. We take on our walk. And we get to the movie theater, and as I'm sitting there, I like to sit all the way in the back because I don't like anyone behind me. And we're sitting all the way in the back, and I had bought Junior Mints, actually, a little box of them, and I had them on my lap. And I look over, and now the movie hasn't even started yet. We're not even in the previews. We're still in those, trivia questions that they put on the beginning of movies. People are kind of filing in, and I see this being. And it was very dark and very large, and it was on the left-hand side of the theater. And what caught my attention and made me even look over there in the first place was there was a lot of teenagers and young people who were filing into the theater, which, it's a scary movie, obviously. That's fun for them. So, and I'm sitting there kind of protective thinking, if all of these young ones are coming in and I don't know what this movie is all about, and they start messing with things afterwards. Like, I'm feeling overprotective, right? I'm kind of mama wolfing over everyone and feeling like, okay, maybe I should just kind of like bubble this space so that no one gets dumb ideas, because I don't want anyone hurting themselves or setting themselves up for failure. So I look to the left and I see this ginormous being, and I kind of tap my cousin without turning my head and tell him to look my way. And he starts to see it. And he's like, "Oh my God, what is that?" And so I start light blasting, which is basically, I'm pumping out light to get this thing gone. And knowing what it is, do not want it near me, let alone in this theater with all these, young people around because I'm very overprotective again. So I'm light blasting, and about 3-4 minutes later, my cousin kind of nudges me and he goes, if you don't stop or calm down your energy, I'm going to have to move over 2 seats. I am literally broiling on my left-hand side. Now, anyone who's been to a movie theater knows they're always blasting the AC. It was also fall, so it wasn't like I was all worked up from the walk because it was pretty cool outside and they had the AC going. So right as he says that, I say, okay, I'll calm it down. And the thing had left at this point. So there's 2 gentlemen who end up sitting kind of right in front of us. The seats right below us, but the way the theater is, basically they could stand up and they would only come to like my ankles, right? It was one of those kind of amphitheater style ones. So all of a sudden I see the thing again. And so I start light blasting again. And my cousin literally rolls his eyes and he just moves down a chair or 2. And the guys in front of us look at each other and they go, do they have the heat on in here? Like, it's really hot all of a sudden. So of course my cousin kind of giggles and I kind of giggle and I tone it down. The thing left. And I go to eat my Junior Mints, which at this point are completely melted together in one giant blob. Now I had them sitting not on my lap, but you know how they have the cup holder and it's right next to your leg. I had them sitting in there. Well, the heat I was producing apparently melted the entire box together to one giant Junior Mint, which I wasn't necessarily mad at, but it was kind of funny. So I digress. We end the movie, we walk home, we're walking home, kind of talking about it, talking about what we saw in the beginning, saying a little prayer for all the kids that were there. And I say kid loosely, anyone who's younger than me is a kid at this point, basically. So we start walking back to my house and we're about 1.5 blocks away and we're kind of kitty corner. So you could see my house, but you're not directly in front of it. And I just dead stop on the walk and I'm staring at my house and all of a sudden my cousin kind of stops and looks at me like, what's going on? And I said, do you see what is in front of my house right now? Now my house is a 2-story, so it's rather tall. And this being was at my doorstep and was absolutely huge and was very dark and very ugly. And I start light blasting and I'm also wondering how this thing even got through my protection barrier, let alone, got up to the doorstep. Got a lot of chutzpah to do that. We'll put it that way. So finally we get close enough and it's gone, but there's these gargoyle typey things that are running around on my roof and I get them gone finally too. And as we walk up to the front door, the energy left by this being was so palpable and so thick and so dark. It was like walking through tar almost. It was absolutely vile. So I open the door to the house and we go to walk in the house and my entire house smells like rotten eggs and smelly feet. That's the best way to describe it. It was just vile, right? Sulfur, vile, disgusting. And obviously I'm a logical person. So I'm thinking, okay, obviously a pipe must have backed up or something happened. And, immediately my cousin's going, it was whatever that thing was that left that smell. And I'm like, hey, let's roll out the physical. So we went, we sniffed every single drain and we went and put our head in the trash to make sure it wasn't the trash, even though there was no trash. And there was no physical reason for that. So I literally opened all the windows and doors, called a couple people for some prayer and protection to clear it out. And we start working on the house. It took about 2 hours for the house's smell to return to normal after that. Now, if you've watched the movie, The Conjuring 1, you'll actually know the entity I am talking about. It is in the movie. It is talked about lightly. I'm not sure if they physically say the name, but I remember there was a scene where there were like kids' blocks and they spelled out the name. Don't recommend saying that name. Don't recommend wanting to play with that. No fun. All right. Last story, kind of weird. I know a lot of people are into UFOs. Have I seen a UFO before? I don't think so. But I've seen something super duper weird. So I'm going to end with this one. I'm driving home one night. It's around 9:30 or 10. Now, mind you, I don't drink. I don't do drugs. I would never drink and drive, never do drugs and drive. That's completely, against all I do. Plus, I don't do any of that anyway. So I'm driving home, and there's a part where it's kind of like a half circle on ramp where it kind of goes up into the air and then kind of dumps you down onto this other freeway. And when you're up there, you're able to see kind of like rooftops of this whole neighborhood off to the right. And then to the left is basically just all freeway. So I'm driving, I'm doing 65, the speed limit, right? And as I get up there, I see this, what looks like a giant shooting star, right? But it is so close that I can literally see the rock on fire, blue and white flames on fire. And it's so low and close that I'm thinking, oh my gosh, like that's going to go and hit the neighborhood right next to the freeway. Cause that I could see their rooftop. So if I could see this thing that clearly, it's going to hit one of those roofs and it's going to take it out. And right as it gets to the point where like it's close enough that I'm now thinking, I'm praying for everyone who's at home, this white circle appears right above it in the sky and literally drops down and hits the asteroid, meteorite, whatever you call it, thingy, and literally blows it up mid-air, and it becomes all these little tiny rocks that, go on fire and probably just cause like pebbles to hail down, but not a full scale, take out someone's home. So yep, that's kind of the weirdest thing I've ever seen in the sky. My original take on it was maybe we have some like super awesome Star Wars program where we can shoot asteroids out of the sky. This was, of course, like early in the pandemic, I want to say. So I want to say like early 2020 when this happened. But I'm not sure what I saw. All I know is that was super weird, and there was no way that could happen naturally because white lights don't just appear randomly in the sky and then drop down and blow up asteroids or meteorites that are about to hit homes. I hope you enjoyed some of these stories. I know they're random and kind of all over the place, but I enjoy that kind of stuff. I actually took notes to write this time. And I hope that any of you who have had weird experiences, have a little comfort in just knowing other people have them too. I know there's a large community out there, but hopefully I'm doing some good in the world. That's my biggest hope, and hopefully this is enjoyable. May you have a blessed day and an even better life. Thank you.